Yes, welcome back from that beautiful break. This is Smart Means Business, and we are getting into what is making the stories on the East African scope. And that is starting off small with the issue between Rwanda and Democratic Republic of Congo. And in the first press conference this year, the president of Rwanda so happens to throw a light, Paul Kagame throws a light on the situation, and he says that everyone is allowed to deal with rebels in Congo except Rwanda. Now, more about this, the Rwandan president Paul Kagame has criticized the international community for looking away from the real problem causing the war in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. And in the first press of the year 2025, the Rwandan leader said that the escalating violence in the neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo is mostly a result of both Congolese leaders and the international community refusing to acknowledge the problem. Instead, he argued that they have found Rwanda to be an easier scapegoat, while covering up what he described as historical causes. And he says that the Eastern Congo problem, which I have in the past indicated is Congo's problem as a whole and for our region, for the continent, and for the rest of the world. Now, he says that the Rwandan leader spoke as Kinshasa tightened local controls, including a threat of death sentence for the media reporting on versions of the war that Rwanda or the M23, which Kinshasa says is backed up by Kigali, and Rwanda has denied these claims. The trouble in Eastern DRC has been the M23's continued war against the Congolese army and the allied forces, including some military people. Now, in the past, the M23 and the Congolese government appeared to be moving closer to a long-term peace deal before it broke down 2 years ago. Since then, the sporadic fighting has often been punctuated by peace talks that have often pushed for a ceasefire that is hardly obeyed. Now, why would Congo or Rwanda be the peace? Why did this peace bid flop? Mr. Kagame says that the international community should be ready to point fingers at DRC, and the M23 are mostly composed of Kinyarwanda-speaking Congolese people. However, Kinshasa accuses Rwanda of backing the rebel group and claims that a UN panel of experts has corroborated in the past. Now, Paul Kagame, the president of the Republic of Rwanda, rejects the allegation, and he says that the actual problem is the international community's failure to address their grievances, including constant persecution from authorities in the Democratic Republic of Congo, as well as covering up the culprits, including the FDLR rebels, accused of committing genocide in Rwanda in 1994 before fleeing into the Democratic Republic of Congo. And he says that the international community have entertained them. I think they have deliberately preserved the FDLR, and I don't know for what, whether it is a gift of thanks to them for having committed genocide or preserved them because they are anti-Rwanda. Now, for the part of the reason MONUSCO is in DRC was to address this problem. But after 30 years, if you ask the UN what they have been doing there, what is there to show? Only to end up blaming Rwanda for everything that has happened there. Problems of Congo are blamed on Rwanda by this so-called international community. And that is what the president, Paul Kagame, says, referring to the French acronym for the UN peacemaking mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And for the last 30 years, the name of the mission and the mandate have morphed over the years. Now, of course, while the press conference or the press release was meant to discuss various issues, including Rwanda's position on the continental quests such as push for UN reforms, the conflict of the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo was always going to be a hot issue. And just last week, more than 100,000 civilians were displaced from Eastern DRC's Kivu provinces in the renewed fighting between the M23 and the Congolese forces. And medical charity group MSF also reported on an increased number of civilians checking into hospitals with wounds, a signal of rising violence. President Paul Kagame said that the conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo wouldn't be resolved even if Rwanda were to be relocated to a region of the world, because no one is focusing on the cause. People get lost in the blame game and forget to really address the root cause of the problems we have and find a solution. That is what the president of the Republic of Rwanda says. And he continues to say that Rwanda has argued that the solution lies in the direct dialogue between the Democratic Republic of Congo and M23, something Kinshasa has rebuffed. It labeled M23 as a terrorist group, and last year alone, some of the leaders of the group were sentenced to death, although some were in exile. Wherever their meetings were to discuss how to end this problem, Rwanda was present. But I have never discovered that there amounts to the same thing. It doesn't address the problem. The leaders of those processes holding people's hands is not in itself. We have results built on addressing the root cause. Now, basing off this article from African International Media Nation Group about the press release of the president, we see that Paul Kagame, the president of the Republic of Rwanda, says that the fight that has continued between the M23 rebels as well as the Democratic Republic of Congo could probably be having another cause besides it being caused by the people in Rwanda, because they claim that most of the M23 soldiers are actually Rwandan, and he says that they are simply Congolese who speak Kinyarwanda because of the issue that happened of the genocide. We all know about the genocide that happened in Rwanda between 1990 and 1924 between the Hutu and the Tutsi. We see that the Hutu staged this and the Tutsi fired back. So basing off that, a number of people sought out political asylum, a number of the Hutu sought out political asylum in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So that's why they end up speaking Kinyarwanda still to this day and age. And according to him, it is those people who fought against Rwanda in 1994. They are still the same people who are being harbored into Democratic Republic of Congo, and they're the ones who are bringing about this whole M23 situation, as well as combining their party with that of the FDLC, who also took part in fighting. So he says that the international bodies that are supposed to be keeping peace and security around the globe are claiming that claiming that Rwanda is the one that is sending these M23 rebels. But his claim is simply that they should be able to focus on what the international bodies are also playing, the role they are playing in continuing the situation between Rwanda and DRC. Now, we see when it comes to the eastern region, this conversation has been going on, and in the amendments made by the East African community, conversations between trusting each other, and they always bring up the situation between Rwanda and DRC as some of the things that are making it hard for the regional integration to continue its work diligently. However, of course, we see that Kagame is continuously addressing this situation so that the real issue bringing about these conflicts is actually broken down and seen by everyone, because he claims Rwanda is definitely not taking part in this war between themselves and that in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And that is what is making the headlines in Rwanda. However, when we move to Kenya, yes, and this will of course take a little bit, pick a little bit of Uganda's interest, because we see that there is a Tanzanian activist known as Maria Sarungi who recounts her abduction in Nairobi. Now, we should be reminded that this lady Maria Sarungi is a prominent journalist and a vocal critic of the Tanzanian government and President Samia, and she was also over the weekend, one of the weekends she had in Chilimani, Nairobi. She was abducted by 3 armed men driving a black vehicle. She was released on Sunday evening, hours after her abduction, and she is now pointing a finger at the President Suluhu's administration for her abduction in Nairobi, saying that she is unhappy and with her online activism against or ahead of the polls. Now, the brief detention comes as the governments of both Tanzania and Kenya stand accused of abducting critics. And when we see this, when it comes to the Ugandan scope, we see again that Dr. Kizza Besigye, who so happened to be presidential, or let me say elect or nominee, or someone who wanted to go for the presidential seat for 4 times, was also recently abducted from the Republic of Nairobi or the Republic of Kenya in the same manner that this journalist was. And of course, this raises a question when it comes to the economic prosperity of the East African community. The fact that people who go to these countries to seek political asylum are being abducted every day, and some of them are actually being killed. And that is an article that she continues to talk about when it comes to criticizing the safety of these political asylums when it comes to the seeking it in the Republic of Kenya. Now, moving forward, we see that the President Hassan ordered an investigation into the abductions last year, when several government critics were abducted and injured or even killed by unknown people in a pattern which rights groups say that the government targets opponents in the run-up to national elections expected later this year. Now, the Amnesty International researcher Robert Ebole said that Sarungi's abduction was another example of transnational repression that is happening on Kenyan soil. And in November, a Ugandan opposition figure, Dr. Kizza Besigye, was kidnapped in Nairobi and forcibly repatriated to Kampala, where he faces charges in a military court. And of course, he criticizes why Dr. Kizza Besigye is also facing these allegations in a military court, given that all this situation happened in Kenya. Why aren't these people being tried where they were arrested? For instance, if it's true that the claims that they were found with armed possessions is true, then it means that they should be tried in Kenya, because that is where they were possessing these weapons, and rather not in Uganda. So that is what is happening in Tanzania. And moving forward again, maybe we see a situation that is happening between Ethiopia and Somalia. And this simply looks at Ethiopia, Somalia agreed to reunite diplomatic ties. Now, Ethiopia and Somalia agreed on Saturday to restore bilateral terms or ties that were severed last year as they bickered over a controversial memorandum of agreement on the breakaway Somaliland. The move came after the President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed visited the Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa on Saturday afternoon, and he held talks with the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Now, the landmark decision means years of tension between the two neighbors, and this means that the tension between them could be over, but they still have to work out the fate of the Memorandum of Understanding, which Ethiopia has signed with Somaliland, a region Mogadishu compares or considers its territory. Although never been publicized, the Memorandum of Understanding reportedly granted Ethiopia a lease on a coastal strip in Somaliland to build a naval base in exchange for recognition of Somaliland as an independent state. Now, on Saturday, however, a joint communication issued after our meeting said that the two leaders have exchanged views on a range of bilateral and regional issues of mutual interest and held constructive discussions on strengthening the fraternal relationship between the peoples of the two countries. Both sides reaffirmed their commitment to deepening bilateral relations and addressing the key regional challenges, it said. The leaders also stressed the need for their diplomatic missions in multilateral and regional forums to cooperate closely on matters of mutual interest. Somalia and Ethiopia have tapered relationships over the decade. Twice they went to war, but Ethiopia has been a key cog of Somalia's rebuilding over the last 2 decades, including deploying troops both as part of African Union mandated missions to Somalia and through bilateral agreements. Now, the latest dispute had come to an inopportune time, just as Somalia and its partners were preparing to transition from the African Union Transition Mission in Somalia to the African Union Support Stabilization. And maybe a little bit about the mission is, while Ethiopia has been part of the ATMIS, Mogadishu had indicated that it wouldn't be in Awesome, and Somalia walked back to the stance last week, signaling a role of Ethiopia in a new mission. But Somalia has reached an agreement with Egypt, traditionally an Ethiopian rival in the Horn of Africa. And in Addis Ababa, the leaders emphasized that regional stability depended on strong cooperation between the two nations based on mutual trust, confidence, respect, and dispatch said. Now, they agreed to collaborate closely to enhance regional relationships and promote mutual understanding and drive shared progress. And the discussions also highlighted the need to strengthen security cooperation between the new countries. And looking at this article, that is from Addis Ababa, or is from the correspondent in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, Nation Media Group. Simple a little bit about it is that the Ethiopian leader as well as the Somalia leader have revamped their agreement on bilateral relations when it came to the issues that they have been having over a small land. Now, we all know Somalia is one of those economies that is probably weak because of the constant fighting that they are having every other day. And of course, one of the countries they end up fighting with so happens to be Ethiopia, a neighboring country to them. And of course, this poses a challenge when it comes to their economic growth, because you know, one thing that is going to help African countries grow as one is if we work together to achieve common goals. That is why we see the effort played by the African Union in seeing this. And these disputes between the two countries is one of the things that had stopped their bilateral trades and ties that they had established over the 2 decades, despite the hardship. So we see that this year, however, they would love to start off on a clean slate as they go on and partner in a number of ties that can be able to help the economic integration move forward. And of course, we wish them the best, because this does not only benefit their economies, but it does benefit the Ugandan economy as well as the African economy at large. The more peace that is in the region, the more peace that is on the continent of Africa, the more economic prosperity that means for the rest of us. And finally, as we look at the East African scope, we see that Africa throws money at youth farms in efforts to rein in unemployment. And of course, this conversation is an important one, because we see that every other day, the number of graduates are growing, leave alone when it comes to an African scope or East African scope in Uganda alone. But we see that farms are continuously taking part to see that the young people actually do have a source of employment and not live their lives to waste. And more about that, maybe we see that 10 years after adoption of the 2030 Sustainability Development Agenda by the United Nations, Africa remains far from achieving the goal of taming youth joblessness, and many countries are shifting their focus to financing youth enterprises as a means to boost self-employment. The latest estimates from the Africa Youth Employment Clock, they lobby indicate that in 2025, about 121 million youth aged between 15 to 35 will be unemployed or classified as not in education, employment, or training, and 2.8 million more than in 25. So of course there's been an increment of 2.8 million just from between the year of 2024 and 2025. And need I say that actually 2025 just started. So if the statistics are this high at 2.8 in just a difference, then how will they be 6 months down the road, you know? So of course this poses a question, but however, this should not be an issue of question or talk every other day. We also see that there is some private entities that are taking it upon themselves to ensure that young people are educated. And of course, when we look at such missions, which are aiming at giving resources or financing young people to create their own jobs, that means that there will be an era of more job creators than job seekers, meaning there will be a lot more employment opportunities. And of course, when we look at the economy of Uganda alone, we cannot forget to acknowledge the role played by the Private Sector Foundation of Uganda, which has continuously reached out a number of graduate opportunities to young people so that they can be able to get easy access to jobs, as well as facilitate themselves when it comes to transitioning from education to just workspace. But of course, when we look at an international scope or looking at Africa alone, if by the year 2025, 121 million young people are not employed, they are not in school, and they are not undergoing any form of training, of course, that raises a question as to where the young people are going. We all know that most of the African economies have their biggest percentage of their demography being the young people. So if the young people do not have what to do, then what next? Does that raise the question of increased crime rates? Because everyone at the end of the day needs a source of income. So I would leave that question to you. I don't know if you are a young person. I don't know if you are in the position of hiring a young person. But I hope that we work with young people in order to ensure that the generation ahead is secured. You know, it is the young people who are in charge of what will be taking place in 2040, 2050. So we should extend a hand to them so that we can be able to help them transition easily. And of course, our graduates coming in from Makerere University, we continue to wish them the best of luck, and we hope that they are able to transition well into the job environment of Uganda's economy. That is what I had for you for Karibu East Africa. Let's go for a brief break, and we shall be back with more stories, especially our motivation or quote of the day. Please stay tuned. This is Smart Means Business.